Imagine this. Someone collapses on a crowded sidewalk, gasping for air. But instead of rushing to help, 30 people pull out their phones and start recording. Nobody calls an ambulance. Nobody checks their pulse. Everyone just watches. Why do good? Normal people suddenly turn into heartless spectators when a life is on the line. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover the dark psychology behind why crowds make us blind to emergencies, and the exact psychological hack you can use to break this spell and save a life. Have you ever walked past a car alarm blaring in the street and thought, well, someone else will deal with it? Or maybe you saw someone drop their groceries in a busy supermarket, and you just kept walking because there were a dozen other people around. It is easy to judge the people recording emergencies on their phones and label them as sociopaths. We all like to think that if we were in that situation, we would be the hero. We would be the one to sprint forward, push through the crowd, and save the day. But psychological science tells a much darker and more uncomfortable truth. The more people that are present during an emergency, the less likely any single person is to help. This phenomenon is known as the bystander effect, and it is a hidden bug in human psychology that has cost countless lives. To understand why our brains glitch in a crisis, we need to travel back to the year 1964, to the streets of Queens, New York. The story of Kitty Genovese is the dark origin of the bystander effect. The narrative that dominated the newspapers for decades was that 38 people watched from their apartment windows as a horrific attack took place below, and not a single person picked up the phone to call the police. While modern historians have pointed out that the media exaggerated the details of this specific case, the psychological shockwave it sent through the scientific community was profound. Psychologists John Darley and Bibb Latin read the headlines and asked themselves a terrifying question. Were these 38 witnesses simply cold-blooded, apathetic monsters? Or was there a deeper, hidden psychological mechanism at play that paralyzed them? What Darley and Latin discovered through a series of groundbreaking and slightly terrifying experiments changed our understanding of human nature forever. They identified two main psychological forces that paralyze crowds: the diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance. Let us break down the first mechanism. The diffusion of responsibility is essentially bad math happening in your subconscious brain. Imagine you are walking down an empty street, alone at 3 in the morning. Suddenly you hear someone screaming for help. In this scenario, you are the only one there. 100% of the responsibility falls squarely on your shoulders. If you do not help, no one will. Your brain recognizes the immediate moral weight of the situation, and the adrenaline kicks in. You act. Now change the scenario. It is 3 in the afternoon. You are in a crowded public square with 500 other people. Suddenly, someone screams for help. The bad math begins. Your brain subconsciously divides the responsibility by the number of people present. With 500 people around, you feel only 0.2% responsible for taking action. Your subconscious whispers to you, someone else has probably already called the police. Someone else here is a doctor. Someone else is better equipped to handle this. When everyone is thinking exactly the same thing, the result is total paralysis. The responsibility diffuses into thin air, and the victim is left alone in a sea of people. This is not apathy. This is a cognitive overload where the perceived cost of intervening is outweighed by the assumption that the crowd will handle it. But the diffusion of responsibility is only half of the equation. The second force is arguably even more insidious: pluralistic ignorance. As human beings, we are highly social creatures. When we are faced with an ambiguous situation, a situation where we are not entirely sure what is happening, we do not look inward for answers. We look outward. We look at the people around us to figure out how we should react. Imagine sitting in a waiting room filling out a questionnaire. Suddenly, thick gray smoke starts pouring into the room through the air vent. If you were alone, you would likely jump up, cough, and run out the door to find help. But in one of Darley and Lattin's most famous experiments, they put a single genuine participant in a room with several actors. When the smoke started filling the room, the actors were instructed to act completely normal. They kept filling out their questionnaires, occasionally coughing but showing no signs of panic. What did the genuine participant do? They looked around. They saw that nobody else seemed worried. So their brain rationalized the danger away. Maybe it is just the air conditioning acting up. Maybe it is steam from a radiator. They sat in a room rapidly filling with smoke, coughing and rubbing their eyes, but doing absolutely nothing, simply because the crowd appeared calm. This is pluralistic ignorance. It is the collective illusion that everything is fine, simply because everyone is looking at everyone else and nobody is panicking. In an emergency, we use the calmness of the crowd as evidence that there is no emergency. We are literally tricking each other into doing nothing. Why did evolution hardwire us this way? It seems counterproductive for a social species to ignore a member of its group in distress. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that the bystander effect is actually a misfiring of a survival mechanism. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans lived in small, tight-knit tribes of 50 to 150 people. In these small groups, everyone knew everyone. If someone was in danger, the responsibility was clear, because the survival of the tribe depended on every individual. But our brains did not evolve to process living in cities with millions of anonymous strangers. When we are surrounded by people we do not know, our ancient brains misinterpret the social signals. We evolved to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary risks unless the benefit to our immediate kin was obvious. In a massive crowd of strangers, stepping forward involves social risk, physical danger, and cognitive effort. So our brains fall back on the safest default setting. Blend into the herd, observe the alpha members or the majority, and do not draw attention to yourself. The herd mentality was a brilliant survival strategy on the ancient savanna, but it is a fatal flaw on a modern city street. Fast forward to the modern era, and the bystander effect has evolved into something even stranger. The smartphone effect. We now carry high-definition cameras in our pockets everywhere we go. When a crisis unfolds, the immediate instinct for many is not to intervene, but to document. We see people holding up their phones, recording accidents, fights, and tragedies. It is easy to view this as the ultimate form of modern narcissism, the desire for viral fame overriding basic human empathy. But psychology offers a more nuanced explanation. The screen of a smartphone acts as a psychological shield. When you view a traumatic event through the lens of a camera, it creates a sense of psychological distance. You stop being an active participant in reality and become a passive director of a movie. The framing of the screen distances you from the immediate horror and emotional weight of the situation. Furthermore, the act of recording feels like taking action. The person recording might subconsciously believe they are helping by documenting the event for the police or for raising awareness later. This false sense of contribution further diffuses the responsibility to step in physically and stop the crisis. The phone becomes a barrier between the bystander and the victim, amplifying the paralysis. So if our brains are wired to freeze in a crowd, are we doomed? Is human nature fundamentally flawed? The answer is no. Once you understand how the machine works, you can hack it. You can break the spell of the bystander effect. And knowing this hack could literally save your life or the life of someone you love. Imagine you are the one having a medical emergency in a crowded place. You fall to the ground. You cannot breathe. You look up and see a circle of faces staring down at you, some holding up phones. You are experiencing the bystander effect firsthand. If you simply scream, "Help me, somebody help me," you are addressing the crowd as a whole. You are feeding into the diffusion of responsibility. Everyone will assume the person next to them is going to step forward. To break the spell, you must shatter the anonymity of the crowd. You must eliminate the diffusion of responsibility by targeting one specific individual. You point directly at someone. You make aggressive eye contact. You identify them by a physical characteristic. You point and yell, "You, the man in the blue shirt with the red hat. I need help. Call 911 immediately." In that exact moment, the psychology of the situation flips upside down. The man in the blue shirt is no longer part of a faceless crowd. The responsibility is no longer divided by 50 people. It is instantly consolidated and placed entirely onto his shoulders. You have ripped him out of his pluralistic ignorance. The social pressure is now focused entirely on him to act. He can no longer assume someone else will do it, because you have specifically assigned the task to him. This targeted assignment is the antidote to the bystander effect. If you need a doctor, do not ask if there is a doctor in the house. Point to specific people and assign them tasks. You call an ambulance. You help me clear the area. You find an automated external defibrillator. By giving direct, unambiguous orders to specific individuals, you cut through the confusion and force the brain out of spectator mode and into action mode. Understanding the bystander effect is not about making us feel guilty for our psychological quirks. It is about awareness. The next time you find yourself in a crowd witnessing a potentially dangerous or ambiguous situation, you will feel that familiar urge to wait and see what others do. You will feel the comfort of the crowd pulling you into inaction. But now you know what is happening. You can recognize the diffusion of responsibility creeping into your mind. You can recognize pluralistic ignorance making you second-guess your own senses. You can be the one to break the spell. You can be the one to step forward, point a finger, and take control. Because in an emergency, the greatest danger is not always the crisis itself. Often the greatest danger is the paralyzing silence of a crowd waiting for someone else to act. Do not be the crowd. Be the spark that breaks the silence.